This month, the Scottish Government expressed concerns about the potential impact of Brexit on the availability of food in Scotland. The government highlighted the lack of clarity from Westminster about post-Brexit trade arrangements and the potential for increased costs and delays at the border now with the checks coming in place. Scottish ministers also expressed concern about the potential for shortages of certain food items, particularly those that are not produced in Scotland. They warned that these shortages could lead to even more price increases and reduced consumer choice. The Scottish Government's concerns were echoed by industry representatives. The Scottish Food and Drink Federation expressed concern about the potential for disruption to supply chains and the loss of access to EU food and stuff. And the Federation warned that these disruptions might even lead to job losses and damage in the Scottish economy. In response to the Scottish Government's concerns, the UK government has said that it is committed to ensuring that the supply of food in Scotland is not disrupted by any consequences of Brexit. However, the UK government has also said that it's necessary to have a closer look at the supply chains because of the new checks. Fruit and vegetable growers across the UK are bracing for the impact of the new post-Brexit border checks now, which are expected to exacerbate the supply chain problems of long waiting lines and raised overhead costs for keeping perishables refrigerated. And these looming changes are part of the new border target operating model. That's a post-Brexit border regime designed to tighten control over imports. While the government asserts that these measures are to safeguard the UK against biosecurity threats, the agricultural sector fears collateral damage. The National Farmers Union, the NFU, raises alarms over the policy changes scheduled for April, which could disrupt the import of young plants vital for the upcoming planting season. In a statement shared with Food Ingredients First, NFU President Minette Better says, "For the past 3 years, British farmers have faced the full reach of EU controls on our exports, while the EU has enjoyed continued easy access to the UK marketplace. This is not just an issue for competitiveness, with our farmers faced with additional costs and paperwork, but also for our nation's biosecurity. Under the current system, some imported plants are subjected to checks based on risk assessment. However, according to the BTOM guidance, the impending regulations mandate 100% inspection of consignments at newly established border posts, and this shift may result in potential harm to delicate young plants, according to the NFU. Most soft fruit plants, including strawberries and raspberries, begin their journey in countries like the Netherlands. The prospect of these plants suffering damage or destruction at border posts is a concern for growers who fear the repercussions on their crops and businesses. The NFU is advocating for a more practical solution, urging the government to permit place of destination checks and adopt a risk-based approach to minimize the number of inspections. Domestic producers work under stringent UK regulations to guarantee the safety of our food, ensuring shoppers are not misled and protecting our countryside, flora, wildlife and farmed animals, stresses the coalition. We support import controls that are proportionate in providing an appropriate level of biosecurity and food safety while keeping costs and delays as low as possible, as Better says. It has been claimed that the challenges for producers of fresh fruits and vegetables could have an adverse effect on both the diversity of available food on the shelves and in food stalls across the UK and the sustainability. It warns the implementation of new checks could lead to the damage and destruction of fruit and vegetables, impacting growers with potential losses due to delays and limitations in the capacity to process incoming plants in a timely manner. Impacts of the recent logistics policies are also creating concerns for the importers. In a draft strategy of Brexit import checks from last year, the UK Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs was considering imposing charges on every consignment entering the country from the EU. Fresh Produce Consortium warned at the time that extra charges would lead to additional costs passed on to consumers, as importers can't absorb them. Moreover, prolonged waiting at the border may mean extra energy consumption for preserving food products in logistics and may also contribute to an increase in carbon emissions. This concurrently adds to pressure to waste management, as a 2022 Italian research paper flagged horticultural distribution activities already suffer from a high incidence of surplus food and food waste. On January 31st, the UK introduced new post-Brexit checks on imports from the European Union for certain goods, including plant and animal products, as part of its ongoing implementation of the UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA. And these new checks aim to protect UK biosecurity and ensure compliance with EU standards. And there are indeed some key changes on that date. One thing is health certification. Imports of medium-risk animal products, plants, plant products, and high-risk food of non-animal origin from the EU now require health certificates. And these certificates attest to the animal or plant health status of the products and ensure they comply with EU regulations. And there are also document checks. Importers of goods subject to health certification must now provide relevant accompanying documents such as invoices, certificates of origin, and sanitary and phytosanitary certificates. These documents must be submitted to customs authorities prior to importation. And there are risk-based identity checks. For certain high-risk goods, importers may be subject to risk-based identity checks, and these checks aim to verify the identity and origin of the goods to ensure they match the information on the accompanying documents. And there are risk-based physical checks. For a small proportion of high-risk goods, importers may also be subject to those risk-based physical checks, and these checks involve inspection of the goods to verify their conformity with EU standards. And there are even additional changes planned for this year. Expanding the scope of the checks is one thing, because the scope of the checks will be gradually expanded to cover additional goods, including fruits and vegetables, from April, as I said. And the UK government is working to streamline the process of applying for health certificates and conducting checks to reduce the administrative burden on businesses, but we haven't seen anything like that yet. The new checks are expected to have a range of impacts on businesses and consumers in both the UK and the EU. For businesses, the additional paperwork and compliance requirements could increase costs and complexity. And for consumers in the UK, prices for some goods will rise due to the added cost of compliance and, of course, transportation. The government, as I said, has committed to providing support to businesses to help them comply with the new checks, including guidance, training, and financial assistance. It is too early to say definitely what the full impact of the new checks will be, but it is likely that they will have some short-term disruption to trade between the UK and the EU. However, the government at least hopes that the checks will ultimately be beneficial for UK businesses and consumers by protecting biosecurity and ensuring fair competition, although we know the standards in the EU, just saying. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.